Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow stroll through time, all the way back to the ancient Korean kingdom of Silla, where astronomers in flowing silk robes once climbed peculiar stone towers just to get a better look at the stars. You'll wander through old palaces, shuffle past gently creaking rice paper doors, and lie beneath skies that ancient Koreans thought were alive with cosmic messages. You'll hear about why farmers waited on lunar calculations just to plant their millet, why comets were the stuff of royal anxiety, and what one queen may or may not have commissioned just to get a better view of the moon. And yes, there are strange towers that may be calendars, telescopes, or oversized hourglasses, depending on which historian you ask. You probably won't survive this job as a stargazer, by the way. Long nights, heavy scrolls, ominous portents, one bad eclipse, and it's oops, there goes your funding, or worse. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where in the world we're stargazing from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking slowly through the ancient city of Gyeongju, capital of the Silla kingdom. The sun has dipped below the low, green hills, and the sky has turned a silvery violet. Everything smells faintly of warm earth and pine. Lanterns flicker in front of wooden houses with curved tile roofs. And somewhere a gisang hums a tune while tuning a gyeogeum. You trail the scent of charcoal smoke, passing children hopping across flat stones in the road. Ahead of you rises a strange structure. Not a temple, not quite a tower. It's short and squat, built from neatly stacked granite bricks. It looks like the bottle your neighbor might ferment plum wine in, if your neighbor were an ancient Korean monarch. This is Cheomseongdi, and even now it stands proudly in the center of Gyeongju's historic district. But tonight, we're seeing it through 7th century eyes. You pad across short, crunchy grass, maybe brushing your hand over barley stalks as you go. The stars are just beginning to blink into place. There's no electricity here, no city glow, just the darkness of a summer evening and the milky blur of a sky that hasn't been digitally enhanced. And it's here that the royal astronomers begin their work. Behind you, the city rustles with night, servants carrying buckets, oxen snorting softly in their pens, the muted clatter of bowls being stacked in kitchens. But ahead, it's quiet. The astronomers are gathering. One wears a robe dyed deep indigo, embroidered faintly with stars. He carries a scroll in one hand, bound with a red thread. Another adjusts her headpiece, a thin golden band holding back hair that's already escaping in the humid breeze. They greet each other with soft murmurs, their sandals crunching quietly in the dirt. You're not officially part of the astronomy office, but you've been allowed to tag along, as long as you stay quiet and don't touch anything important. Not that you were planning to climb the tower or play with their star charts. But the reminder doesn't hurt. Inside the nearby palace, the king is finishing his evening meal. He will be expecting a summary of the night's sky by dawn. You imagine him chewing slowly, thinking of the stars and whether they'll say he'll have good fortune, or whether it's time to cancel that parade. The stars here are not just stars. They're clues, warnings, blessings, sometimes all three. A gust of wind tickles the silk of your borrowed robe. Above you, the Big Dipper hangs low and enormous. But here, it's not called that. The Korean name, Bukdaeilsung, translates to something like 7 stars of the Northern Dipper. It's not just a ladle, it's a directional anchor, a seasonal clock, and sometimes, a cosmic government official. The astronomers have already started measuring. One holds a long, bronze instrument that resembles a cross between a sundial and a ruler. Another quietly unrolls a map of the sky and places it on a low wooden bench. They don't look up dramatically like in the movies, mostly. They glance, jot notes, murmur, adjust. It's all very understated, until a shooting star zips overhead, and then, for a second, everyone holds their breath. Was that a sign? Historians still argue whether every celestial event recorded in this era was seen as divine, or if some of it was just cool. A meteor. You suspect it depends on the political climate. But tonight, it passes without commentary. The team resumes their slow, Rhythmic movements. Like monks in a silent ceremony. You're handed a small clay cup of barley tea. It's earthy, bitter, and oddly perfect for this moment. You sip, quietly watching the astronomers chart Venus's position with a confidence that suggests they've done this since childhood. Which, in some cases, they probably have. A soft bell rings in the distance. That's the temple's curfew bell. You note that it coincides almost exactly with the appearance of a particular constellation overhead, one that ancient records say heralds calm in the south. Is it coincidence, pattern, or centuries of observational precision? There's a calm to all this. No telescopes, no wires, no beeping monitors, just people, stones, shadows, and sky. And yet, the data they record tonight will shape decisions. It will affect planting cycles, royal ceremonies, and maybe even military campaigns. That's a lot of pressure for a group of quiet people staring upward and scribbling notes. Your tea's gone cold. Someone hands you a blanket. Without a word, apparently, you're staying a while, and honestly, you don't mind. You shuffle closer to Cheomshungdi, that odd bottle-shaped structure of ancient stones. Up close, it's more peculiar than impressive, at least by modern standards. Only about 9 meters tall. It doesn't quite reach for the heavens. There's no dramatic staircase, no imposing gate, no telescope jutting from its top. And yet, it might be the oldest surviving astronomical observatory in all of East Asia. Cheomshungdi means star-gazing tower. Which sounds almost romantic, doesn't it? Like you're about to witness ancient lovers scanning the heavens for signs their crush feels the same. In reality, you're more likely to find scribes grumbling about cloud cover and lantern oil shortages. The tower is made of 362 pieces of granite. And this is where things get a little suspicious. That number just so happens to be very close to the number of days in a lunar year. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. Historians still argue whether this was intentional design or if someone just had an oddly satisfying number of rocks lying around. The precision seems too perfect to be accidental. But then again, ancient stonemasons weren't exactly leaving footnotes. You walk slowly around the base of the tower, noticing how the structure narrows toward the middle, creating a soft hourglass curve. From a distance, it almost looks like it's breathing, an organic contrast to the flat fields around it. There's a small, square opening about halfway up, and if you're tall enough, you can peer inside. Spoiler: it's not exactly a party in there. No spiral staircases or glimmering devices. Just a hollow core, the occasional nesting bird, and an interior shaft that may, or may not, have aligned with certain celestial bodies during solstices and equinoxes. One theory suggests that sunlight streaming through that little window marked seasonal shifts. So if the light hit just the right point on the interior wall, you'd know spring was around the corner. No weather apps, no farmer's almanac, just sunshine through stone. You lean back and look up. The stones seem darker now under the moonlight, moss creeping between them like nature's sleepy signature. Somewhere behind you, a frog begins its nightly solo, echoed faintly by others in the paddies beyond. Nearby, an elder scholar with a wispy beard leans on a walking stick made from polished pine. He tells you, almost as if reciting a bedtime story, that the tower's 27 levels might symbolize Queen Seondeok, the ruler who likely commissioned it, and the fact that she was the 27th monarch of Silla. A nice touch of royal vanity. If true, another scholar, overhearing, rolls his eyes so hard you worry for his optic nerves. Symbolism, he mutters. Everyone thinks everything is symbolism. Still, it's not impossible. Queen Seondeok was known for her love of astronomy. After all, and she had a flair for the dramatic. According to legend, one so exaggerated it almost loops back to plausible. She could predict eclipses. More likely, she employed smart people who could do that for her. Delegation. The secret to ancient astrology and modern spreadsheets. As you circle the tower, a light breeze rustles through a nearby apricot tree. The petals have mostly fallen, dotting the grass like stardust. You imagine a younger courtier, maybe your age, recording sky patterns night after night, hoping for that one accurate forecast that would win royal favor and a promotion out of mosquito duty. A shooting star glides silently across the sky. You glance at the astronomers again. No reaction. Either they're extremely jaded, or they saw something more interesting last week. Apparently, one comet last month had a red tail and freaked out the kitchen staff so badly. The palace had to postpone its dumpling festival. Tragic. You sit down cross-legged near the base of Cheomshungdi. The grass cool beneath you. The air thick with the smell of damp stone and pine. For a while, you just breathe. In the 21st century, this might feel like mindfulness. Here, it's just waiting for the stars to move. And as you stare up at the little tower, so quiet, so odd, so inexplicably meaningful, you wonder what exactly it was for. Was it really an observatory? A sundial? A monument? A calendar? Some fringe theories even suggest it served as a kind of early horoscope generator, with light and shadow indicating propitious days. No one knows for sure. There's no plaque, no instruction manual, no surviving diaries from the royal architects explaining their creative choices. But what you can see is care. Every stone fits perfectly with the next. There's a pattern, a rhythm. Someone, or several someones, spent months, maybe years, making sure it stood tall, aligned, enduring. And it has endured, through wars, invasions, dynastic collapses, colonialism, modern construction, and countless rainy seasons. It's still here, quietly ignoring your modern brain trying to make sense of it. You stretch your legs and lie back on the grass. From this angle, Cheomshungdi leans into the sky like an old friend whispering secrets you're too sleepy to decode. The stars above blur slightly as your eyelids grow heavier. Somewhere nearby, a cricket starts up, off-tempo and out of tune. Perfect. Maybe this tower wasn't just for science or prophecy. Maybe it was for moments like this. Quiet, watchful, half-dreaming. You won't be submitting any lunar charts to the Royal Archives tonight. But you feel a little closer to the people who did your startled awake, not dramatically. More like that fuzzy blink when your nap merges with reality. The stars haven't moved much, but the night air has cooled just enough that you pull your robe a little tighter. A brazier crackles nearby, throwing off a faint, woodsy aroma and that reddish glow that makes everyone look like they're auditioning for a candlelit drama. The astronomers are gathered in a huddle now, quietly murmuring over scrolls. One of them is tapping a bamboo stylus against the wooden floor of a platform you hadn't noticed before. It's just a raised stage, tucked beside the tower, with slats perfectly spaced to let in moonlight and spill it onto the charts below. You rise, quietly, so as not to alarm the astrologically inclined, and make your way over. They welcome you with a nod. One hands you a scroll and gestures for you to unroll it slowly. You do, careful not to crinkle the delicate paper. It's covered in grids and inky dots, sky maps. Some constellations are familiar, others not so much. Here, the stars are organized by both celestial and seasonal logic. There's the black tortoise of the north, and the azure dragon of the east, symbols that stretch across East Asian astronomical traditions. Rooted deeply in Taoist cosmology and adapted over time by Chinese, Korean, and Japanese scholars alike. In Korea, these groupings merged with local names and agricultural calendars to create a uniquely Silla view of the cosmos. It's like the sky had its own bureaucracy, departments of stars, job titles for celestial bodies, and interstellar HR issues whenever a meteor shower broke protocol. One astronomer points to a dark smear of ink representing the Milky Way, or Silver River, as it's often called in East Asia. To them, it's not just a pretty band of stars, it's a celestial divide, separating two legendary lovers, the weaver girl and the cowherd, who can only meet once a year across the sky bridge of birds. Romantic? Yes. Astrophysically accurate? Let's not ruin it. As you follow their fingers tracing constellations, you begin to understand how the night sky wasn't merely decoration. It was the blueprint for earthly behavior. Crops were planted according to lunar cycles. Major decisions, like declaring war or marrying off your fifth cousin, were postponed if a certain star blinked the wrong way. Even criminal trials could be delayed if the heavens weren't in the right mood. You try not to laugh when one scholar shows you a particularly odd star map. It includes a constellation shaped like a turtle wearing a hat. He insists this represents a guardian spirit of flood control. Another scholar coughs loudly, clearly unconvinced. You begin to sense a pattern here. Ancient astronomy, like modern academia, is full of polite disagreement, strategic eyebrow raises, and the occasional completely bonkers theory. Historians still argue whether the Silla kingdom had its own distinct zodiac or simply adapted Chinese systems wholesale. Some evidence points to an evolving blend, imported constellations layered with homegrown interpretations. Like a cultural collage stapled to the sky. Others claim that Korea developed its own star lore in tandem with its neighbors. Drawing from older shamanistic traditions that emphasized weather, animal spirits, and ancestral guidance, you gaze again at Cheomshungdi, now a looming silhouette against the stars. Some theorists believe it wasn't used so much for direct observation as for symbolic alignment, a kind of ritual anchor between Earth and sky. Others argue it functioned as a solar calendar. Still others think it might have been a prestige project. Look at our stone telescope. No, you can't climb it, just admire. And yet, here you are, standing under the same sky they watched 1.300 years ago. With stars that haven't gone anywhere. Even the sky, in all its slow-motion drama, feels eternal tonight. You take a deep breath. And it's like inhaling time itself. Earth, pine, ink, fire, stardust. Behind you, one of the astronomers chuckles softly. Apparently, a novice mistook Jupiter for a divine messenger last week and nearly triggered a royal fast. These things happen. The breeze picks up again. You wrap your robe a little tighter, noticing the frayed edge of your borrowed sash. Everything here is beautiful, but also practical. Even the celestial maps are drawn with soft brushes on paper mulberry bark, flexible, biodegradable, and blessedly lightweight. You're handed a second scroll, this one covered in predictions. Tomorrow's weather, lunar movements, maybe even the next eclipse. It's all written in careful calligraphy, each character dense with meaning. You can't read half of it, but you recognize a symbol repeated several times, the character for auspicious. Someone, somewhere, is hoping for good news. You wonder who: a general about to launch a campaign? A noble family planning a wedding? A farmer nervously awaiting rain? You shift your gaze upward. The moon is higher now, fat and yellow as a rice cake. One of the astronomers has begun timing its arc across the sky, marking the minutes with a clepsydra, a water clock that burbles faintly beside the platform. You watch, hypnotized, as the water drips into a basin below, measuring time in the slowest, most soothing way imaginable. Eventually, someone taps a gong, not loudly. Just a soft metallic note, and the team begins packing up. Scrolls are rolled, instruments bundled, and the brazier is gently extinguished with a hiss. It's the end of their shift. But yours isn't quite over. You're invited to walk the palace gardens before heading to your quarters. The offer is given casually, as if it's normal for guests to take a starlit stroll at midnight under the guidance of astronomers. And really, why not? Your wooden sandals tap gently against the stone path as you follow a winding trail through the royal gardens. The astronomers have dispersed like shadows, returning to their quarters with tired smiles and ink-stained sleeves, leaving you alone in a place so carefully manicured it almost feels fictional. The air is thick with floral scents, wild ginger, jasmine, and something you can't quite name. It's faintly citrusy, like an herbal tea someone forgot to finish. You pause beside a pond, where moonlight scatters across the surface in ripples of silver. A fat koi fish stirs near the edge, disturbing the reflection of a willow tree that droops dramatically over the water. It's a tree that's seen things: political gossip, stolen dumplings, whispered romance, and it isn't talking. As you stroll, you pass several stone tablets inscribed with ancient Silla script, some weathered nearly blank, others still clear. A few scholars believe these tablets once served as lunar markers, meant to be viewed in coordination with the stars above and the tower back in the courtyard. Others suggest they're just poetic musings about peonies. Honestly, both theories hold water. You arrive at a pavilion shaped like a lotus blossom. The wooden floor is cool beneath your feet, polished smooth from centuries of restless pacing and quiet contemplation. You sit at the edge, your feet dangling slightly over a small stream. Fireflies bob in the air like lazy stars who forgot to rise on time. Somewhere in the distance, a zither plays, a single plucked melody rising and falling like a heartbeat you can't quite locate. This is when the real story unfolds. Not in battles or proclamations, but in the daily rituals that tethered the Scylla elite to the sky. Each season brought a different celestial focus. Winter skies were for long-term predictions, eclipses, comets, ominous portents. Spring was planting season, marked by lunar phases, star clusters, and subtle shifts in the Silver River's arc. You picture a young court astronomer in spring, probably wearing a hat too big for his head, carefully recording the appearance of Vega in the early evening sky. As per tradition, his handwriting is pristine, his ink block, overused, his stomach, rumbling, but he keeps at it, because Queen Siondiog expects accuracy, and also because the last guy who mixed up Venus and Mars was reassigned to rice weighing duty in the outer provinces. And what a queen she was. You've heard whispers already, how she consulted the stars for statecraft. How she allegedly outwitted a Chinese envoy using only a peony and her own celestial charm. Legends say she never married, instead devoting herself to her people and the stars. Some historians argue this was a calculated political move, reinforcing her singular role as monarch and cosmic intermediary. Others suggest it was her own personal choice. Either way, it worked. Beneath Siondiog's rule, astronomy blossomed, new observatories were funded, foreign star maps imported, local scholars trained in celestial navigation. This wasn't just science, it was governance. A kingdom that could read the sky. They believed, could read its future. And the people believed it too. Farmers planted by moonlight, fishermen consulted the tides alongside the stars. Even merchants traveling along the early trade routes, rudimentary paths that would one day become part of the Great Silk Road, carried pocket star charts etched on bone or bronze. These weren't decorative, they were tools, life rafts. Really, in a world governed by timing and weather and luck, you stretch your legs, and a cool breeze washes over you, rustling the silk banners hung from the pavilion. Each banner is painted with soft pastel constellations, Delphinus, Cassiopeia, Lyra, some rendered with impressive accuracy, others with what can only be described as interpretive enthusiasm. And then, a whisper of memory floats through your mind. That turtle wearing a hat. You smile. Somehow, that odd little constellation now feels like a friend. A sleepy, shell-bound friend who just wants you to stay awake long enough to watch the next meteor. But tonight's skies are calm. No fiery trails, no rare alignments, just the steady, predictable parade of stars doing what they've always done, shining, drifting, marking time, the kind of consistency your modern brain secretly craves. You think again of the stone tower back in the courtyard. Cheomshungdi. It doesn't sparkle, it doesn't move, but it endures. And maybe that's the point. In a world that was constantly shifting, politically, seasonally, emotionally, Cheomshungdi was the thing that stayed put. A quiet promise carved in granite, that the stars are still there. Even when you can't see them. You begin to nod off again. The garden sounds melting into a low, steady hum, a soft splash from the stream. The distant hush of bamboo swaying. That sleepy zither, still playing, as if the musician's hand forgot to stop. For a moment, you wonder if this is what it felt like back then, when the scholars and monks and court astrologers finally finished their work, closed their scrolls, and wandered through these same gardens under these same stars. Probably not. Their sandals were stiffer, their backs ached more, and they probably weren't allowed to steal an extra rice ball from the kitchen on their way out. But still, the sky was the same. And so was the hush. You yawn, not a dramatic yawn, just the kind where your eyes water a little and you forget what day it is. You let yourself lean back against a lacquered pillar, the wood cool and smooth against your cheek. You wake up, or rather, drift back into awareness, just as the horizon begins to smudge from black to blue. Dawn is a slow process here. No neon lights, no honking traffic, just a deep exhale of sky, as if the earth is reluctantly shrugging off its starry blanket. The pavilion's shadow grows shorter, and the banners sway in a quieter wind. A soft clatter nearby pulls your attention. Someone's setting down a tray of breakfast items with exaggerated care, clearly trained not to disturb even the fussiest royal guest. You glance down. Sticky rice wrapped in lotus leaves. A cluster of pickled radishes that resemble miniature suns. And a ceramic cup of barley tea. Still steaming. You make a mental note to request this breakfast in your real life. Even though you already know it'll never taste quite the same outside this dreamy pocket of time. Just as you're about to take a bite, a gentle knock, more like a polite tap, signals your next guide. She's young, maybe 15, with ink stains on her sleeves and a look that says she knows how to find secret shortcuts through the palace. She bows and gestures for you to follow. Today, it seems, you'll be touring the royal school. Yes, that's right, Scylla had an educational system. And no, it didn't just involve memorizing royal lineages or the proper way to fold ceremonial robes. You cross into a shaded corridor and find yourself in a stone-floored hall, where students huddle over scrolls, whispering equations and star positions. Some glance up at you, eyes wide, probably wondering what you're doing here in half-crumpled robes. Clutching a rice bundle and smelling faintly of zither music, your guide points out a large chart on the wall. Painted in careful ink, it's a curriculum calendar. And guess what? Astronomy gets its own row. In fact, it's not even optional. Every noble student, especially those destined for court service, had to demonstrate knowledge of key constellations, celestial timing, and basic astrology. The stars, here, were more than decoration, they were instruction. Historians still debate whether this emphasis came from royal decree or from a cultural reverence that predated even the Silla dynasty. Some scholars argue the earliest Korean tribal groups practiced star-gazing as part of their shamanistic rites. And what we're seeing now is just the institutionalized form of those older traditions. Others say Queen Seondeok simply adored the stars and wanted everyone else to join the club. You watch a teacher lean over a student's scroll, gently correcting the placement of a planet. The scroll is an intricate map, but one that appears a little too enthusiastic with the glittery gold ink. The teacher tuts softly, wipes off the excess sparkle with a cloth, and mutters something about aesthetic discipline. In the corner, another group is practicing something that looks suspiciously like interpretive star poetry. One student reads a verse aloud, likening Mars to a stubborn rooster. You try not to laugh when the others nod solemnly, as if this is the most profound thing they've heard all week. But for all the gentle rhythm of this school scene, there's serious business underneath. The Scylla elite weren't just training bureaucrats, they were crafting harmony between heaven and earth. To them, ruling successfully meant aligning your decisions with the stars. If the heavens were displeased, if an eclipse occurred at the wrong time, or Venus wandered too far west, it could reflect badly on your moral character. Kings could be judged not just by their taxes or military victories, but by their astrological charts. No pressure, right? This belief didn't end at courtly affairs either. Everyday folks often turned to local sky watchers for guidance. Marriages were scheduled based on lunar alignments. Journeys delayed if a hungry ghost star was visible. Even fishermen consulted celestial charts before setting sail, not because they thought stars would bless their nets, but because they believed celestial tides were intimately linked to earthly ones. You walk past an open window where two students are building a small mechanical model, a kind of proto-armillary sphere made of bamboo hoops. It creaks and wobbles as they spin it, one hoop marking the celestial equator, another the ecliptic. It's more optimistic than accurate, but charming all the same. Your guide finally leads you to a quieter room, a library, where ancient star maps are stored in wooden drawers. Each map is a marvel. Some are drawn in ink, others in colored threads stitched onto silk, still others painted on flat bark sheets. One particularly worn piece shows a sky full of stars, but also tiny annotations in the margins. You lean in. Someone has doodled a small chicken beside the constellation Orion. Another has scribbled a poem in the corner about the sadness of spring comets. It's comforting to know that even in the 7th century, students still doodled when they got bored. You sit for a moment and run your hand gently along the edge of one of the drawers. The wood is worn smooth from centuries of use. Like the lip of a favorite teacup. You imagine the quiet hands that once touched this same surface, scholars, teachers, students who stayed up too late watching the stars and whispering about destiny. There's something so tender about it. Not the grand, sweeping version of history with wars and kings, but the small, daily effort of people trying to understand the universe with whatever tools they had. Bamboo pens, string models, open sky, a pinch of hope. Outside, the morning birds begin to chirp, softly, as if they too were trained in quiet reverence. You sip the last of your barley tea, now lukewarm, and let your gaze return to the map in your lap. It doesn't feel ancient, it feels like a letter, written for you across time. And above you, the stars carry on, perfectly indifferent to your growing sleepiness, but perhaps a little flattered by the attention you're sitting now in the shade of a mulberry tree. A bit outside the Royal School's library. The stone bench beneath you is warm from the sun and there's a comforting hum of quiet activity around you, footsteps on gravel paths. Muffled laughter from students rehearsing their star poems again. One rhymed, Ursa Minor, with sticky rice dinner, which, frankly, deserves an award, and the occasional rustle of scrolls unrolling like sleepy dragons. From this peaceful perch, your guide hands you something unexpected. A scroll unlike the polished court records or tidy maps. This one is rough, handmade, the script uneven. It's a record from an unknown Silla monk who kept nightly sky notes. Not for court use, not for predictions, just for himself. You read a snippet. Tonight the stars over Gaiarum Forest were unusually bright. I saw the jade rabbit hopping across the moon. My rice burned. It's oddly poetic, not exactly NASA material. But it's a window into how ordinary people in ancient Korea saw the sky, not as a cold chart to be decoded, but a living landscape full of personalities. They didn't just look at constellations. They talked to them, befriended them, sometimes even blamed them for burnt rice. And speaking of the stars' personalities, your guide perks up at this moment and leads you toward another building, one less grand than the palace or the library, but more intimate. It's the archive of celestial myths. You slip off your shoes at the threshold and step onto smooth wooden floors that groan faintly beneath your weight. Like an old cat being woken up too early. Inside, scrolls are organized not by region or ruler, but by story type. Love affairs of the stars. Petulant gods. Celestial creatures with attitude. You love it already. She hands you another scroll. This one featuring a tale of the star Altair, known locally as Gyunu, and the weaving maiden Vega, Jikneo. Separated by the Silver River, what we now call the Milky Way, they're allowed to meet only once a year. On the 7th day of the 7th lunar month. You've probably heard some version of this story. But here, the details differ slightly. In this Scylla version, their meeting depends on the behavior of crows and magpies, who must form a bridge with their wings. If it rains, the birds don't show. You imagine two celestial lovers ghosted by bad weather and some unmotivated birds. Some historians say this tale arrived from China via the Tang dynasty, then blended with Korean animist traditions. Others argue a version of it may have predated the Tang influence entirely, shaped by earlier indigenous star stories. Like many myths, it's tangled in oral history and half-forgotten symbolism, and scholars are still trying to decode the layers. But to you, it just feels soft, like a bedtime story, one people told not just to children, but to themselves, on nights when the sky looked too big and the rice harvest seemed too far away. As you unroll another scroll, your fingers trace images of animal constellations, tigers, deer, cranes, all placed lovingly among the stars. Some are obvious, others require generous imagination. There's even a constellation that resembles a spoon. Not a ladle, a spoon. You suspect someone got hungry halfway through drawing. Your guide chuckles when you point it out and murmurs something about the great celestial dinner set. You suspect she's making that up. But honestly, it feels possible. These stories weren't just whimsical. They were mnemonic tools, ways for people to remember star positions, seasonal changes, even moral lessons. Don't let your temper flare like Mars. Be steady like the North Star. Avoid borrowing tools during a lunar eclipse, a rule someone probably made up after losing a really nice rake. And yet, for all this mythic richness, these tales were never rigid dogma. They flexed, evolved, reshaped with each telling. One village might see a bear in the stars, another, a mother gathering herbs, and that was fine. The sky was not a fixed doctrine, it was a living mirror of the people who watched it. You move to a small alcove where paper cutouts hang from the ceiling, each representing a different heavenly creature. A dragon spirals near a fox. A turtle with stars on its shell spins slowly on a string. The shadows they cast flicker across the wooden floor, making it feel like you're standing in an underwater temple made of starlight and sleepy paper animals. Outside, the light shifts again, and you hear the distant clang of a gong. It's a quiet one, more a suggestion than a command, probably marking mid-morning, or time for a tea break, or maybe just reminding people to breathe. You realize how strange it feels to be in a world where no one's checking their phone, where nobody's worrying about algorithms or inboxes or that email you swore you sent last Thursday. Here, the only algorithm is the movement of Venus. The only notification, a bird calling from a tree. You sip some more barley tea, now reheated and handed to you in a cup shaped like a lotus. It tastes faintly floral, like someone brewed it under moonlight. You sit cross-legged, the scrolls unfurled around you like a cozy paper nest, and breathe in the scent of wood and ink and time. Somewhere out there, the stars from those old stories still shine, though they've drifted slightly. Thanks to the slow wobble of the earth, the turtle constellation may have shifted its shell. The weaving girl and cowherds still try to meet once a year, provided the crows are on board. And the spoon? Well, it's probably still up there, waiting for a midnight snack. You look up and smile. The ceiling scrolls swaying gently, the shadows curling across the walls like dreams. You rise slowly from the wooden floor, your knees issuing tiny pops in protest, as if they too have aged several centuries from all this time travel. The scrolls, the mulberry tree, the quiet myths, they've left you feeling like you've just woken from a dream inside another dream. Your young guide doesn't say a word but simply gestures toward the eastern garden path. The sun is higher now, casting a soft lemony light across the stone walkways, and the air carries the faint scent of camellia blossoms and, is that grilled chestnut? You make a mental note to track down a snack cart later. Assuming ghostly historical snack carts exist in this reality, the path winds gently down to a sunken courtyard. It's ringed by a low stone wall and half encircled by cherry trees whose petals have started to drift lazily onto the ground like sleepy confetti. You step inside and realize where you are. This is the Astronomers' Court. A wide, circular platform sits in the center, plain stone, worn smooth by generations of sandals. Around the edge are low plinths, each carved with symbols, moons, cranes, constellations, water ripples. Your guide explains, quietly, reverently, that this was where court astronomers came to practice their observations. No fancy instruments, just eyes, paper, and an ability to stand still longer than a squirrel on green tea. They'd gather here, especially on clear nights, wearing thick robes against the mountain chill. Some carried polished bronze mirrors to catch the moonlight. Others used bamboo tubes as rudimentary sightlines. And occasionally, when nobody was looking, someone probably brought snacks. It's easy to romanticize it, but the work was demanding. Long hours, cold toes, the pressure of advising kings based on the flicker of a distant planet. You squint up at the bright sky, trying to imagine the firmament as they saw it, not a background, but a message board for fate. Historians still argue how precise these court astronomers really were. Some records suggest they were able to predict lunar eclipses within a day's margin. Which, let's face it, is impressive for a team without software, calculators, or even indoor plumbing. Other scholars believe they sometimes predicted events after they occurred, retroactive star wisdom. Shall we say? You walk over to one of the plinths, where a particularly grumpy-looking crane has been chiseled. Your guide explains that each plinth aligned with a point on the horizon that marked seasonal shifts. When the sun rose in line with the crane symbol, it was time for the spring festival. When it lined up with the carp carving, it was time to plant rice. There's a lovely logic to it. Earthly rhythms guided by celestial choreography. You pause, Suddenly aware of the sheer effort this all required. No Google Calendar alerts. No world clock apps. Just generations of trial and error. Stargazing. And a probably unhealthy dependence on good weather. And then, there it is. Off to the far side of the courtyard. Tucked behind a plum tree like it's hiding from the tourists who won't show up for another millennium. You recognize it from old sketches. Though the real thing feels somehow smaller and yet infinitely more magical. The Cheomshungdi Tower. It rises modestly, about 9 meters tall. Built from 362 granite stones. Supposedly one for each day in the lunar year. Cylindrical, slightly top-heavy, with a small square window halfway up. It looks almost like a giant stone hourglass or a lighthouse that gave up halfway through becoming a lighthouse. You walk slowly around its base. There are no signs, no plaques, just the tower and the silence it keeps. You can't go inside, it's long since been sealed for preservation. But you press your hand gently to the stone. It's cool, coarse, solid, timeless. Your guide, now standing a respectful distance away, offers a few details. Some historians believe Cheomshungdi was used to track solstices and equinoxes based on how light entered the window and fell onto the floor. Others argue it was mostly symbolic, an architectural nod to the kingdom's celestial curiosity rather than a functional observatory. The truth? Likely both. In ancient Silla, symbolism and science didn't stand at odds. They waltzed together. A stone tower could be a giant sundial and a monument to the queen's love of stargazing. Speaking of Queen Seondeok, you remember her, right? Tiny, ferociously brilliant, owns 2 zither sets. This tower was most likely built under her reign. Around the 7th century, there's a theory that the square window marked the queen's own birthday based on the position of the sun when it first lit the interior at dawn. Was it a royal birthday candle made of rock? Perhaps. Historians still debate that one. 2. You lean against the wall opposite the tower and let your gaze wander back up. The clouds have thinned into delicate veils. And the sky is turning a blue so rich it looks almost edible. Someone once said the stars are the original script, our first stories. Our first gods, our first fears of the dark. But here, next to a pile of carefully stacked stones, you feel something deeper. These weren't just tales written in the sky, they were anchors. Ways to root oneself in a world that didn't come with instructions. And for all its simplicity, Cheomshungdi is still standing. Weathered, yes. Cracked, maybe, but standing. With the same quiet stubbornness that once defined the Silla kingdom itself. A gentle wind rolls through the courtyard, carrying the faint sound of a zither. Someone's practicing again. Probably the kid who keeps rhyming stars with snacks. You smile and close your eyes. And for a moment, you forget what century you're in. You blink slowly. The zither notes still trailing behind you as your guide leads you away from the Cheomshungdi Tower. The path is a little uneven here. Sunken stones surrounded by tufts of moss and tufts of, is that wild chive? You bend down, rub a bit between your fingers. Yep, smells like soup. Your guide chuckles and explains that ancient Korean astronomers didn't just chart the stars. They also mapped their effects on agriculture. Health, even food. You're now walking into a space that feels part garden, part research lab, part sleepy uncle's backyard. It's a reconstructed Silla-era agricultural station, where lunar cycles dictated when to plant, when to harvest, and, if you believed the stars, when not to borrow your neighbor's hoe. Because if you do that during the first crescent moon in the second lunar month, legend says your crops will grow upside down, or your cows will walk backwards. The stories vary. The whole place smells of soil and wood smoke. A patch of barley sways gently in the breeze, while small signs next to each plot list planting times based on both solar and lunar calendars. Your guide hands you a flat piece of carved wood, a farmer's almanac. It's painted in faded yellows and reds, with dots arranged like constellations across each month. But instead of names like Orion or Cassiopeia, you see, Bean Moon, Red Pepper Week, Time of Sneezing Winds. They took stargazing seriously, but not solemnly. This is where science and daily life intertwined. Court astronomers didn't live on some ivory tower separate from the people. They advised farmers, helped healers choose the best days for treatments, and warned the public about unlucky dates, like the Day of Stubborn Rice, when cooking anything was a recipe for disaster. Even today, some old families avoid weddings on certain days tied to star movements, lest the marriage be as short-lived as a comet. As you continue through the garden, a cluster of children run past, giggling, each carrying tiny star maps carved into wooden paddles. They're part of a reenactment class. Your guide explains, learning how ancient kids were taught to read the sky. You wave at one of them and she scowls back, probably taking her role very seriously as a miniature court astronomer. A row of gourd lanterns lines the path now, their interiors carved with celestial patterns. As the sunlight hits them, the light filters through, casting constellations across the dirt. A little bear, a long-tailed fox, a spiral that might be a galaxy or maybe just someone got dizzy halfway through carving. You pause at a small shelter with a thatched roof, where an elderly figure is seated cross-legged, humming softly as they rub herbs into a paste. Your guide introduces her as a local herbalist who keeps traditional sky-linked remedy traditions alive. She tells you, in a voice like moth wings, how certain illnesses were believed to descend from particular stars. A headache during a Leo moon? Ginger tea. An upset stomach when Mars is visible? Plum bark boiled in rainwater. If Venus blinked 3 times before dawn? Best stay in bed. You sit beside her for a while, watching her movements. There's something deeply comforting in the rhythm. Grind, stir, sniff, scoop. You ask if she really believes the stars influence health. And she smiles slowly. They influence sleep, don't they? She says, pointing up at the midday sky. Why not other things too? You sip the tea she offers, slightly bitter, slightly floral, and guaranteed, she says, to align your spleen with the heavenly turtle. You don't know what that means, but your spleen does feel calmer. Nearby, a wooden sign leans at an angle, listing the star days of silence. Your guide reads it aloud. Days when the moon disappears completely. And people were encouraged to speak less, eat simply, and avoid conflict. It was believed that the absence of moonlight left the soul vulnerable. Best not to disturb the balance with loud opinions or too much garlic. Historians still debate how widespread these beliefs were. Some records suggest it was more common in the southern regions of Scylla, while others think it was simply a court tradition later romanticized by poets. As with many old customs, the lines between real practice, symbolic gesture, and wishful storytelling blur like mist over the paddy fields. As you rise to continue your walk, the herbalist hums again, this time, something almost lullaby-like, and you catch a few words about star soup and moon breath. You're not entirely sure if she's reciting a recipe or a prayer. Possibly both. Your guide now leads you toward a small wooden platform built at the edge of a pond. Floating on the surface are thin wooden discs etched with star patterns and holes, ancient astronomical sighting tools that used light and water reflection to simulate the night sky. You kneel and peer through one of the holes. The blue sky above shimmers in the water below, forming a mirrored cosmos. You realize now that the Scylla people didn't think of the stars as above them. Not really. They were around them, in their food, their breath, their soil, their sleep. There was no divide between the sky and life. The stars weren't cold points of light, they were relatives, advisors, mischievous friends, occasionally nosy neighbors who told you what day to trim your hair. The wind picks up gently, sending the lily pads into a slow spin. Somewhere, a water bird calls out with a comically flat honk, ruining the moment like a cosmic slide whistle. You and your guide both laugh softly, startled out of your reverie. Even here, even now, the world can't help but add a little joke. You rise again, stretching gently, your back popping like old parchment, and prepare to follow the path up toward the hills where the celestial school once stood. But for now, you pause. Let the light catch in the star mirrors. Let the tea settle in your belly. Let the echoes of moon calendars and herbal tunes wrap around you like a second layer of skin. The trail curls upward now, winding through a corridor of whispering bamboo. It clicks and sways softly with each gust, like a forest-sized wind chime. You keep one hand trailing along the smooth stalks, and your guide doesn't speak, perhaps out of reverence. Or perhaps because they know the incline is enough of a conversation stopper. You're headed toward the site of the old Scylla Celestial Academy, less Hogwarts. More open-air mountain school with homework that depended entirely on moonrise times. It was perched here, just above the fields and towers, where sky watching could happen uninterrupted by the smoke and noise of city life. You don't see buildings, only foundation stones and a few restored platforms, but the air hums with that ancient classroom energy. The ghosts of lectures past seem to linger, pacing invisibly with long sleeves and longer metaphors. The students here, your guide explains, weren't only male. Royal women, especially during Queen Seondeok's reign, were encouraged to learn astronomy as part of their court training. It was believed that understanding the heavens gave one wisdom in earthly matters. That, and the queen had a habit of scolding anyone who thought star charts were just for boys. You imagine it now, a class of young scholars sitting cross-legged on woven mats. Some squinting through hollow bamboo tubes, others scribbling down observations by moonlight. They'd mark star positions using pebbles on lacquer boards, or etch them into thin strips of wood they carried around like pocket journals. And if someone nodded off during a lecture? Well, you try staying awake while listening to a lecture on lunar declination patterns delivered in monotone at 3 a.m. You reach the main stone platform, flat, wide, and rimmed with old pine. This was the lecture square. Your guide hands you one of the writing tablets, a simple wood plank with soot ink and a stylus. You hold it, awkwardly, wondering what on earth you're supposed to write. Your guide suggests copying what students once learned here. The 4 celestial signs, used to divide the night sky. These were the blue dragon of the east, the black tortoise of the north, the white tiger of the west, and the vermilion bird of the south. Each governed a direction, a season, and a set of constellations. You imagine them circling overhead like silent sentinels. Their stories tied not just to the stars, but to wind, rice, illness, travel, even marriage prospects. Historians still argue whether these signs were adapted directly from Chinese models or modified to reflect Scylla's own beliefs. Some evidence suggests a kind of hybrid cosmology, a sort of pan-East Asian mythological remix where regional tweaks added local flair. You draw a little lopsided tiger on the board, feeling vaguely artistic, then immediately regret it when you realize a 10-year-old student from 645 CE probably could have done better. Your guide kindly refrains from commenting. From the edge of the platform, the view stretches wide over the valley, the fields like patchwork, the towers like chess pieces, the sky a canvas so pale and soft it feels painted in milk. The students here didn't just study positions of the stars, they also learned what those positions meant. Was the moon in Yun Mu the black tortoise? Then perhaps a child born that night would grow into a leader. Did Venus vanish for more than 3 nights? Better postpone any big decisions, especially anything involving boats or fermented foods. And if a comet streaked across the western sky? Time to double-check your will. They weren't just predicting eclipses, they were interpreting omens. Reading the sky like a diary half-written by the universe, half-doodled by mischievous fate. A carved stone nearby lists famous graduates of the school. You run your fingers across the names. One of them, a woman, is noted for having predicted a meteor shower 2 days early, using nothing but lunar tables and gut instinct. Another, known simply as Elder Cloud, lived to be 90 and spent his retirement sketching constellations on river pebbles and handing them out to children like celestial candy. There's even a funny footnote on one of the stone plaques. It recounts how a student once claimed he discovered a new star pattern that looked suspiciously like a rabbit riding a cart. When the master asked him to explain its significance, the boy apparently shrugged and said, "Maybe it's delivering moonlight." The class laughed for a week. The teacher, it's said, made him paint it on every water jar in the school. You sit at the platform's edge, letting your feet dangle. The pine branches overhead sway slightly, casting shifting shadows that mimic constellations. A breeze brushes against your neck, cool but kind. Below you, the Cheomshungdi Tower still stands. The garden flickers with reflected light. And all around, unseen but deeply felt, are the layered memories of skychasers past. A woman's voice, gentle, amused, sings a fragment of an old tune as she passes down the trail with a bundle of kindling. You catch only the ending. And if the stars fall out of line, just tuck them back, like laundry twine. A strange lullaby, but fitting, in a place where the stars were never far from the laundry, or the tea, or the fears and joys of daily life. You lie back for a moment, your spine pressing against warm stone, and watch a bird spiral lazily across the sky. For a second, you feel aligned, like a dot in one of those ancient star charts. Exactly where you're meant to be. You rise slowly from the stone platform, brushing dust from your palms as the last light of day begins to slip gently toward the horizon. The pine needles underfoot soften your steps as your guide leads you away from the celestial school and into a smaller, tucked-away grove. Here, the air is cooler, and the bamboo has given way to plum trees, their branches heavy with small, underripe fruit and moss. In this quiet hollow lies something unexpected, a kind of sky-themed obstacle course. Well, a poetic one. This was where Scylla astronomers, scholars, and occasionally ambitious courtiers came to test their celestial wits through a series of symbolic trials. It sounds dramatic, but don't worry, you won't need to leap over fire pits or outwit a riddle sphinx. You arrive at the first challenge, a long, shallow pool lined with bronze plaques. At its center sits a wide stone basin with water so still it looks solid. Your guide picks up a thin wooden rod from the nearby rack and offers it to you with a wink. Try to find the morning star, they say. You peer into the basin and realize that the bronze plaques are inscribed with constellations, mirrored perfectly in the reflection of the water. Using the stick to trace the alignment, you're supposed to find where Venus would appear during a specific lunar phase. It's like celestial Sudoku, only much wetter. As you fumble through it, accidentally poking a koi fish that was definitely not part of the test, your guide gently points out the correct alignment. There it is, the morning star, nestled between two curving patterns labeled with poetic names, Swan's Elbow and Dragon's Whisper. Historians still argue whether this basin activity was used to train astronomers or whether it was more of a meditative game to encourage focus and pattern recognition. Either way, it's oddly calming. You feel yourself leaning over the water longer than necessary, mesmerized by the way the sky seems to shimmer just beneath the surface. You move on to the next trial, a circle of standing stones, each etched with a different date and lunar phase. This was a memory test. A Scylla scholar would have been expected to recite the star positions for each date, cross-referencing them with nearby celestial events, eclipses, meteor showers, seasonal transitions. Your guide reads a few out loud. One stone bears the date of a lunar eclipse that took place during Queen Siondiok's reign. On that night, according to legend, the sky turned an eerie grayish blue, and the moon's disappearance was interpreted as a sign of political unrest. The queen responded by lighting every tower and shrine in the capital, bathing the city in firelight to assure her people that she was watching. Even if the heavens weren't, the connection between celestial events and politics wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. In an era where public trust and divine favor were deeply entwined, an eclipse could spark fear, rumors, or even rebellion. Some officials kept backup calendars just in case a different date would be more convenient. Didn't you see the moon vanish last night? Nope. Mine says it happens next week. Must be a regional eclipse. You chuckle at the idea of bureaucrats arguing over star dates like teenagers arguing about horoscopes. Farther along, there's a small open-air stage, a semicircle of stones forming natural seats. This, your guide explains, was where students presented their final projects. One by one, they would stand in front of their classmates and describe a new way of interpreting the sky. Some proposed alternate theories for seasonal star shifts. Others invented new constellations entirely. One student even suggested that the stars weren't fixed at all, but slowly danced over time in long, elegant arcs, an idea no one could prove, but everyone secretly loved. You sit for a moment on one of the stone benches. The sun is low now, casting long amber shadows across the stage. A breeze kicks up, carrying the scent of plum blossoms and old parchment. You imagine a young scholar pacing nervously, clutching their notes. glancing upward at a sky just beginning to show its first stars. Maybe tonight, the sky would cooperate. Maybe the stars would appear just where they needed them to. Next to the stage sits an odd artifact, a cylindrical wooden object with tiny holes punched into it in spiraling patterns. You ask your guide what it is, and they grin. A star drum, they say. Spin it and shine a light inside. You do. The interior lights up as the drum spins, casting points of light onto the nearby trees, tiny constellations whirling gently in the dusk. It's a simple planetarium, but effective. You feel like you're inside a snow globe of stars. Or maybe a slow-motion fireworks show designed by introverts. Scholars here used the drum to explain celestial motion. Each spiral represented a path a star might take across the night sky. Students would spin the drum and recite the associated stories, legends of foxes chasing moons, turtles hauling galaxies, and cranes that sang in solar tones. And yes, someone definitely fell asleep in class while the drum spun. That person, you suspect, would have fit right in with tonight's video. Before you leave the grove, your guide shows you one last marker, a small stone with a hole bored through it, just wide enough for a single star to peek through. It's aligned so that only once a year, on the summer solstice, a certain star passes perfectly through the hole at midnight. Did you ever see it? You ask. Your guide shrugs. I always fall asleep before it happens. Same, honestly. You step out of the grove as night fully blankets the landscape. The stars above are bright now, maybe not like they were 1,000 years ago, before modern light, but still enough to hint at the shape of an old dragon. A quiet rabbit, a bird soaring westward, and somewhere out there, Venus is twinkling, smug as ever. Just like she was in the water mirror by now. The air is velvet dark, thick with the sound of crickets and the occasional chirp of a sleepy bird settling in for the night. Your guide, barely a silhouette now, waves you toward the low hill that rises at the far end of the grove. You trudge up its gentle slope, your steps cushioned by moss and pine needles. At the top, you pause, not from exertion, but awe. Spread before you is the entirety of Jeongju's ancient skyline, a serene blend of undulating tomb mounds, flickering temple lanterns, and, unmistakably, the profile of Cheomshungdi, stone against starlight. It looks like it's waiting. Or maybe watching. Your guide gestures to a stone bench tucked just below a weathered sundial. And you both sit quietly for a moment. Then they say, casually, ever wonder why the tower doesn't point straight north? You blink. That is odd. It's not aligned to true north the way modern observatories are. Instead, it leans just slightly, about a 3-degree offset. If you're being picky, historians still argue whether this was intentional or a fluke. Some say it aligns with the rising point of a particular star on a significant date in Queen Seondeok's reign. Others believe it reflects a more symbolic intent, like a nod to an earlier cosmological system, or even to Seondeok's personal birth chart. One very passionate scholar suggested the entire tower is aligned toward her favorite tea vendor. But that paper was politely ignored. Whatever the reason, the slight offset gives the tower a kind of personality, like someone standing just askew at a party, smiling quietly and letting the others talk. You turn your attention back to the sundial. It's been restored, mostly, but you can still see the faint markings in the stone, each one representing a different slice of the day. The gnomon, that's the upright stick, in case you've forgotten your 5th grade science, casts a long shadow now. Completely useless in the dark. But in daylight, it would have been a simple and surprisingly accurate way to tell time. The Silla were surprisingly precise with their timekeeping. They divided the day into 100 moments, called si, which were shorter than our modern minutes. Not exactly wristwatch-friendly, but helpful for measuring rituals, military shifts, and star-watching sessions. You imagine a scholar grumbling, "I told you to meet me at the 62nd si, not the 67th, and the other replying, "You said 67th, you definitely said 67th. Next to the sundial is a second device, a shadow stick. Much taller and used for calculating seasonal variation in sunlight. By measuring how long the midday shadow was, scholars could determine not only the time of day, but also the time of year. It's humble and genius, like a Stone Age Excel spreadsheet. Interestingly, there are records of the Scylla combining sundial measurements with star positions to create what some historians call sky calendars, grids that plotted the movement of celestial bodies against the rhythm of earth-bound life. The harvest, the festivals, even the changing color of temple robes, all tied to these patterns. You lean back and look up again. The sky is crowded with stars now, each one pulsing gently like a sleeping heartbeat. The Milky Way arcs overhead, a hazy path of powdered light. Your guide starts telling you a story, an old Scylla legend about two lovers who lived on opposite ends of the sky. They were allowed to meet only once a year, when the Silver River, that's the Milky Way, parted just enough for them to cross. The stars Vega and Altair, in modern terms, are the lovers. On that one night, usually in July, they align close enough that stargazers believed the celestial bridge was formed. It's the same legend that inspired Tanabata in Japan and Shishi in China. But the Scylla version includes a twist. If the skies were cloudy on the appointed night, the lovers would whisper their words to the wind and hope that the mountain owls would carry them across the sky. You listen to the wind now. It rustles through the grass in slow, low syllables, almost like it's speaking. Maybe it is. You ask your guide if the tower was ever struck by lightning. They laugh and say no, at least, not that we know of. But there is a story that during a major thunderstorm in the late 700s, the tower briefly glowed from within, as if lit by some inner flame. A monk nearby swore he saw constellations swirl inside its windows, like a stone kaleidoscope. Did it happen? Probably not, but it's a nice image. And it fits the Scylla vibe, poetic, precise, just a little mysterious. You glance back at the city again. Some of the modern buildings now poke through the ancient landscape. Neon signs, apartment lights, the dull blue glow of someone watching TV. But they all feel distant. Here on the hill, time seems to have softened, rubbed smooth like river stones. The sky is still the same. The stars don't rush. Your guide stands, stretches, and begins walking back down the hill. You follow, reluctantly, like a child being called inside after playing in the yard too long. Halfway down, you pass another oddity, a small bell mounted on a post. It's rusted and lopsided. You give it a gentle tap. The chime is soft, low, and weirdly satisfying. Your guide nods. Whenever someone discovered a new star, they rang it. You smile. If you squint just right, maybe you did discover something tonight. At the bottom of the hill, the garden path glows with moonlight. The tower looms ahead, framed by trees, silent and proud. One final look, and you turn away, the scent of grass and stone lingering in your nose like a half-remembered song. Your steps carry you down the slope, the path curling gently like a ribbon laid across the land. The air is cooler now, and every breath you take tastes like moss, pine, and old stone. You pause at the base of the hill, taking in Cheomshungdi one last time before your guide gently steers you toward a much less grandiose structure, a squat, square building with thick wooden beams and a roof that seems determined to outlast a typhoon. This, they explain, is a reconstruction of an old Scylla workshop, one that specialized in crafting astronomical tools. You step inside, and the earthy scent of aged wood and oiled brass greets you like a familiar blanket. The room is dim, lit only by paper-covered lanterns and the soft flicker of a charcoal brazier in the corner. Every surface is cluttered. Tools, gears, fragments of star maps, odd-shaped pieces of carved stone, and several instruments you're pretty sure were made up on the spot. Your guide picks one up. It looks like a compass mated with a sundial after a particularly experimental dinner party. This one's a mnemonic projection tool, they say, or at least, that's what scholars think. Historians still argue whether these instruments were designed for actual measurement, teaching demonstrations, or ceremonial rituals. Some say they were used to predict lunar eclipses by tracing arc patterns with chalk and string. Others insist they were essentially fancy props for impressing foreign envoys. You try holding one of the tools, a polished brass ring inscribed with tiny characters and delicate grooves. When you tilt it just right, the light catches the etchings, revealing zodiac signs that predate the familiar Western ones. The turtle, the river fish, the sleeping hawk. You wonder which one you'd be born under. Probably something unflattering. Like the forgetful otter. On the far wall, a faded scroll hangs, covered in dense script and jagged lines. It's a Scylla-era star chart, reconstructed from fragments discovered in a nearby tomb. It looks chaotic at first, stars connected in tangled webs, annotations in poetic metaphors, but your guide explains that it's a hybrid. Part observation, part dreamscape. Unlike modern star maps that aim for pinpoint precision, this chart blends mythology and measurement. The Dragon's Breath cluster isn't just a set of stars. It's also a cautionary tale about ambition and overreach. The lantern path is both a route across the sky and a meditation guide. It's like a cosmic user manual mixed with bedtime stories, designed to help you locate your place in the universe and fall asleep afterward. You walk over to a large table where a scale model of Cheomshungdi has been painstakingly built from clay and stone chips. It's surrounded by tiny figurines, miniature scholars in flowing robes, peering through gaps in the tower or arguing with exaggerated hand gestures. One scholar is lying down entirely, clearly over it. This is a teaching tool, your guide explains. Young students would gather around the model to role-play how observations were made, what tools were used, and how to interpret changes in the sky. Sometimes they even reenacted famous debates, like whether comets were omens of doom or just cosmic lint. And yes, in case you're wondering, Scylla students absolutely passed notes during class. A piece of birch bark was recently uncovered with a scribbled drawing of a teacher with exaggerated ears and the words, "Star Breath Lectures Again," scratched below it. Proof that some academic experiences are truly universal. You crouch beside another display, a fragment of a stone calendar wheel, cracked but still marked with concentric rings. Each ring represents a different astronomical cycle, solar year, lunar month, planetary conjunctions. It's elegant, abstract, and totally bewildering. Your guide admits that modern scholars still haven't decoded all its functions. Some believe it doubled as a kind of prayer calendar, aligning rituals with celestial timings to maximize spiritual oomph. Nearby, a smaller display catches your eye, polished bits of translucent jade arranged in tiny orbits. These, your guide tells you, were used in ceremonial astronomy. Offerings to the sky spirits are perhaps props in public rituals where the queen would symbolically steer the heavens. They were also status markers. Only high-ranking astronomers or royal family members could handle them. You hold one briefly. It's smooth and cool, like a drop of moonlight solidified into stone. You wonder what it meant to believe you could influence the stars. To touch the sky, even symbolically, must have felt like holding fate in your hand. As you explore the rest of the workshop, you notice other signs of daily life. A water jug with an intricate fish motif, a pair of discarded sandals, and, most surprisingly, a small wooden flute tucked into a drawer. Your guide raises an eyebrow. Star lullabies, they say. They believed certain tones helped the mind focus during observations. You raise the flute to your lips but stop. It's too quiet, too sacred a space for even your best off-key rendition of "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." You sit down at the long bench in the center of the room, overwhelmed in the best way. The more you learn, the more intricate it all becomes. Scylla's astronomical legacy isn't just in measurements or towers. It's in tools that looked like puzzles, maps that told stories, instruments that hummed with memory. Before you leave, your guide pulls something from their sleeve, a small scroll tied with a red thread. They hand it to you with a grin. For your birth star, they say. I had a feeling you might ask. You untie it carefully. Inside is a hand-drawn star map, stylized with soft ink lines and miniature illustrations. A sleeping otter floats near a crescent moon. You laugh. Called it. As you step outside, the workshop door swings shut behind you with a creaky sigh, and the sounds of the night return. Soft wind, chirping insects, a distant hoot. The sky is waiting again. Open and endless. You follow your guide back toward the tower now, moving along a different path, one that winds near a quiet stream murmuring through the underbrush. The stones beneath your feet are slick with dew, and overhead, pine branches sway like the slow breathing of an old forest. The air here feels heavier, or maybe just older. Your guide gestures toward a clearing up ahead where a small group of low stone pedestals rise like half-forgotten chess pieces. These weren't for worship or decoration, they were for meetings. More precisely, they marked the gathering place for the Gwynhaksa, or court astronomers. Here, under open skies and before the tower loomed too large in Scylla society. The early watchers of the stars met to debate celestial events, compile nightly logs, and, probably, argue over whose tea tasted like boiled cabbage. Each pedestal was engraved with symbols representing cardinal directions, seasons, or elements. The astronomers would sit cross-legged, align themselves to the heavens, and read from scrolls made of birch bark, bamboo slats, or silk, depending on their rank. You imagine one junior scholar desperately trying to unroll a bamboo script in the wind, muttering curses while everyone else already started chanting. According to some accounts, decisions about public holidays, agricultural rituals, and even royal weddings were postponed or advanced based on what these star watchers observed. If the moon appeared too red, it was considered unlucky to host a celebration. If Venus rose before dawn 3 days in a row, it might be time to start planting barley. Superstition? Maybe, but when you're running a kingdom in a time without satellites or weather apps, the stars are as good a clock as any. One rare manuscript mentions something especially curious: a seasonal contest among the astronomers. Not for scholarly papers or celestial charts, but for poetry. They were expected to compose short verses inspired by the stars they tracked, essentially astrological haiku nights. The winner received the honor of inscribing their verse onto a hanging scroll, which would then be read aloud at court. One such verse still survives, scratched onto the back of a lacquered bowl. Where crane meets river, a lone star blinks uncertain, my tea grows too cold. Not exactly Keats, but it does the job. You sit at one of the stone pedestals now. It's cold through your clothes, firm against your bones. The stars above are impossibly bright, sharp and glassy, like someone poked holes in the sky and backlit them with candlelight. Your guide kneels beside one pedestal and carefully pries open a small hidden compartment, long since overgrown with moss. Inside, a curved piece of polished copper, green with age. It's a fragment of an armillary sphere, a kind of ancient mechanical model of the heavens. Scholars still argue whether this particular one was built for teaching or for aligning with actual constellations. The craftsmanship, even in fragment form, is impeccable. They hand it to you with reverence. You hold it, trying to imagine what it once looked like, concentric rings turning smoothly, mimicking the motions of the stars and planets. A full cosmos, reduced to something you could carry in both hands. Your guide explains that the Scylla sometimes used armillary spheres in tandem with oral recitations. A scholar would rotate the sphere while chanting the star names aloud, forming a kind of moving meditation. You try it silently, turning the fragment slowly, eyes scanning the heavens as if to match it. To your left, a small fox darts through the grass and pauses, just long enough to meet your gaze. It blinks, then vanishes like a ghost into the underbrush. A reminder that in Scylla thought, the line between earth and sky was thin, very thin. As you stand, brushing off bits of moss and time, your guide tells you a rumor. Not from the history books. This one is whispered by night guards and temple caretakers. They say that on the winter solstice, if you sit on the northernmost pedestal just before dawn and stay perfectly still, the stars will flicker twice. First to acknowledge your presence. Second to show you a memory that doesn't belong to you. Of course, no one's managed to stay still long enough. Mosquitoes, itchy robes, impatience. But the rumor persists. You take a mental note. Maybe someday, if you're very patient and very lucky, you leave the circle of pedestals, stepping carefully over wildflowers and fallen leaves. The stream beside you gurgles on, indifferent to your ponderings. Your guide says little now, letting the night speak. In the distance, the soft glow of lanterns returns, and with it, the unmistakable hum of Cheomshungde's presence. And then, you hear it, a gentle clack, the sound of something shifting. Your guide looks at you, startled, but then smiles. You just heard the tower breathe. They say. You blink. It what? They nod, entirely serious. It's rare, only happens when the air pressure changes just right. The stones settle a tiny bit, and it makes that sound. Like the tower exhaling. You're skeptical, but secretly enchanted. You walk in silence, both of you listening, waiting, wondering if it'll happen again. It doesn't, of course it doesn't. Magic is stingy like that. As you near the tower's base once more, the surrounding garden takes on a dreamlike quality. Shadows stretch farther. The stars blur at the edges. Everything feels dipped in silk. You reach into your pocket and feel the copper fragment, still warm from your hand. You don't know what you'll do with it, but you're glad it's there. You've walked with astronomers, listened to ancient verses, held a sliver of the sky. Now all that's left is to let it drift through your thoughts like a falling star. Fading gently into sleep, you find yourself back at the base of Cheomshungdi now. Standing in the long hush between midnight and dawn, the night air clings gently to your skin, and the tower rises above you like a story carved in stone, firm. Unhurried, unbothered, your guide steps aside, leaving you alone for a while. It feels right, this part of the night. Private, timeless. You move closer to the tower's shadow, where a small stone bench invites you to sit. You sink into it, hands in your lap, gaze drifting upward. Let's go deeper now, past the tools, the theories, the gossiping astronomers, and ask, what was it like, truly like, to dedicate your life to the stars during the Silla dynasty? You'd wake before the light, still wrapped in dream fog, and shuffle to the observatory wrapped in layered robes that don't quite keep the chill out. Your fingers would smell faintly of ink and pine smoke. Most days begin in silence. Observers didn't chatter, they listened. To the wind, to the rustle of tree branches, to that odd click a stone makes when it contracts from nighttime cold. Your first task? Logging the prior evening's notes into a ledger scroll. If clouds rolled in and blocked the sky, you'd have to mark it as a non-event night, which some scholars tried to spin as code for caught up on sleep. But the truth was, even when the sky was empty, your duty wasn't. Some astronomers believed that a hidden star was more meaningful than a visible one. That silence in the heavens wasn't absence, it was invitation. One historical account mentions an older astronomer who swore the stars spoke in threes. Not literally, don't worry. This isn't that kind of bedtime story, but in patterns. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. That's how he claimed to predict meteor showers. Historians still argue whether he had genuine insight or was just really bored. You picture yourself watching with him, pointing to a smudge near the tail of the scorched Falcon constellation. He grunts approval and hands you a steamed rice bun, already half-eaten. As the day crests, you'd sometimes give public readings, standing on a wooden dais with villagers gathered to hear what the sky foretells. You didn't get to wear fancy robes for this. Just your observation sash and maybe a sprig of herbs for good luck. You'd read off your notes. The moon enters Crane's path. Rainfall likely in 7 days. Sometimes you were right. Sometimes, well, the farmers just planted anyway and politely ignored you. But the stargazers didn't do this for applause. Not really. In the evening, you'd return to Cheomshungdi. The tower wasn't just a passive monument, it was part of your ritual. You'd pace its circumference, checking the angles. You'd squint through carved openings aligned with Polaris or the lunar apex. You'd place a polished obsidian disc in the center and let moonlight skim across it. If the light curved in a particular way, it meant stable weather. If it flickered oddly, maybe a distant storm. One scholar's notes mention a night when fireflies filled the tower's upper windows. The astronomers saw it as a sign of celestial curiosity, that the stars were leaning closer, trying to peer in. Of course, science tells us the fireflies just liked the heat stored in the stones. But it's a nice image, little lights coming to visit the big ones. The tower became more than a tool. It was a confidant. Astronomers reportedly whispered to its walls, not to seek answers, but to organize their own thoughts. There's even one fragment of poetry carved into the stone's base, likely by a weary apprentice. If stars do not answer, I will ask the stones. They too have watched longer than I. Time slips easily here, doesn't it? The more you imagine yourself inside that life, scraping bark for scrolls, squinting at constellations, the less modern the world feels. You aren't in the 21st century anymore. You're just watching. As your imagined day ends, you'd climb the low hill behind the tower and lie flat on a mat woven from reeds and wool. You'd count stars, not to name them, but to remind yourself of how much remained unknown. Scylla astronomers didn't pretend to know everything. That's one of their enduring charms. They left space for mystery. One favorite belief among them was that every truly dedicated stargazer, upon death, would be carried upward, not metaphorically, but quite literally, by a breeze that only they could feel. It would lift them gently, without warning, until they rose into the sky and joined the constellations they had studied. No one could prove it, of course, but still, on especially calm nights, younger scholars sometimes tied little flags to their belts, just in case. You smile at the thought, floating off like a helium balloon in sensible sandals and ink-stained fingers. Back at the base of the tower, you stretch slightly, still seated on the bench. The night presses gently against you like a familiar quilt. Cheomshungdae's silhouette is almost invisible now, just a darker piece of sky surrounded by stars. A soft rustle behind you. Your guide returns and sits beside you wordlessly. You don't speak either. You don't need to. You've walked across time. You've held starlight in your hand. You've climbed a tower without steps and listened for a breath that might never come again. You close your eyes and lean back. Not to sleep just yet, but to linger. Because in this moment, you're not a guest in Scylla. You're one of its own. The tower is barely more than a shadow now. And the stars above are fading, slowly, softly, like chalk dust brushed from a blackboard. You sit still, watching the color drain from the night sky in slow motion. A violet wash here, a pale yellow thread there, and suddenly the world begins to stir. The astronomers of Scylla would be packing up now, rolling scrolls, dusting off stone markers, whispering quiet farewells to the stars they'd studied all night. It wasn't just duty, it was ritual. To mark the return of the sun was to begin again, to reset the celestial notebook. But we're not quite ready to leave, are we? Your guide points toward a patch of grass just beyond the tower's eastern edge. You follow, feet brushing against dew-covered blades. And there it is, a small stone slab, half sunk into the soil. No name, no date, just a spiral etched into the surface. It's believed this was the private resting place of an unnamed astronomer. Perhaps one of the very first to stand atop this land and declare it sacred to the stars. The spiral could mean many things: eternity, motion, inward reflection. Historians still argue whether it was carved as a final act of humility or a bold celestial signature. You kneel beside it, pressing your fingers to the grooves. They're rough but deliberate, like someone carved them in one slow afternoon. Humming softly to themselves, you imagine their robes tugged by the breeze, their shadows stretching out across this very spot. The Scylla astronomers weren't just scientists. They were artists, poets, dreamers with charts. Did you know they once tried to use lotus petals as a timekeeping tool? Floating a petal on a bowl of water and watching how it rotated, believing the speed matched the rhythm of the heavens. A clever idea, though wildly inaccurate. Still, you have to admire the dedication. Lotus o'clock may not catch on, but the intent was pure. One of the last documents found in the royal archives before Scylla's decline was a fragment of a star chart that showed not the stars, but questions. Literally, there were blank spaces labeled with symbols translating to yet to be seen. As if even in their final days, the scholars of the time were preserving mystery as much as knowledge. That says something, doesn't it? In a world obsessed with answers, here were people who left room for wonder. A gust of wind rushes across the grass, and for just a second, you feel lifted, not quite off the ground, but just lighter, like something in the air has let go. You glance at your guide, and they're already smiling knowingly. Happens sometimes, they say, when someone's been listening for long enough. You're not sure if they mean it literally, but either way, it makes you smile too. You stand again and slowly circle back to the tower. This time, you don't look at it. You walk with it, as though the two of you are old friends taking one final lap before sunrise. You whisper a thank you, not because the tower needs to hear it, but because you do. And now, Before we fade into that soft final stretch, one last quirky tale. There's a legend that if someone manages to sleep directly beneath Cheomshungdi for one full night, they'll dream the sky's original design. Not the stars as they are now, but how they used to be, before humans ever looked up. A kind of celestial rough draft. The catch? No one can remember the dream once they wake. Still, people try. Some bring pillows, others chant lullabies, a few snore too loudly and get politely escorted out by local monks. You wouldn't last long there. Probably. Mosquitoes. No Wi-Fi. But the thought is comforting. This idea that the sky has hidden versions of itself. Shared only in sleep. It fits, doesn't it? Because Cheomshungdi wasn't just an observatory. It was an act of devotion. A promise between earth and sky. You look up one more time. The stars are nearly gone now. Just a few lingering sparks refusing to be extinguished. The tower watches you quietly, as it has for over 1,000 years. And you let it. Because tonight, you didn't just hear history. You stood in it. And now, as the sky brightens and the last star slips behind the curtain of morning, let's begin to let go. Let your breath settle, long and slow. Let your shoulders fall, heavy and relaxed, sinking into the mattress like a stone settling in riverbed sand. The tower, with all its ancient whispers, fades gently behind you. The sound of soft footsteps on grass grows quieter. The rustle of robes, the echo of stories spoken under starlight, all of it drifts away. Like a paper lantern floating downstream. The stars you studied tonight are still there. Even if you can't see them now, they wait, patient and unchanged, behind the veil of day. The astronomers of Silla once trusted that, even without sight, they were never alone under the sky. And neither are you. Maybe tonight you'll dream of floating towers, of lotus clocks and spiral stones, of tiny fireflies pretending to be stars. Maybe you won't remember it in the morning, but the feeling might stay with you. Quiet and comforting, like a gentle hand on your back. You are safe, you are still, the sky is watching, and the tower is resting too. So close your eyes, if you haven't already. Let go of your thoughts. Let go of the day. The stars have clocked out for now. And so can you. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams.